All right, guys, welcome to the show. Today, if you are a female, you're considering having kids, you're getting older, you aren't sure if you should have them, if it's unsafe. We're talking everything about what people have prescribed or described as geriatric pregnancy with my former professor, Dr. Danielle Day, who is also a member of our gym, Architect Fitness. And Danielle is someone that you, at one point in time when you were my college professor, said you would never have a parasite live inside your body, which made the whole class kind of gasp. And then you decided later on, 15 years later almost now, that you wanted to have a child, and you had a child. So, what happened from here to there?
Well, as a scientist, I still maintain that fetuses are parasites. They're, just biologically, that is, you get nothing from them. They get everything from you. I think it's still true even when they're outside the body, by the way, too. But no, you do get a little bit of nice, emotional connection, I suppose. No, I love my daughter. She's awesome. One of my fundamental beliefs is that people can change and can change their minds, and we should be putting some time in to reflect on the reasons why we say we would never do something, and checking in on that. And that was kind of what it was for me. I mean, for my entire life, I think since I was 10 years old, I was always like, I'm never getting married. I'm never having children. And it was like kind of this mantra that I held to. I was an only child, sort of. I had a lot of half siblings that were a lot older than me. So maybe that was part of it too, that I just was very independent. And I didn't want anybody to interrupt that independence. And I think that was a big reason why I didn't want to have children. And also I'm very still supportive of people who are childless by choice. I think you can still have a great life without having kids. And, but for me, I mean, a lot of it was meeting who I'm now married to. And, he was really interested in having family. And I was like, I really enjoy this relationship, but I never really wanted to have a family. So let me think about my reasons why and if they're still true. And I think that reflection kind of helped me see. I was 40 already at that time when I was having that moment, and I had done a lot in my life. I traveled a lot. I did a lot of higher education. I did a lot of things independently, and I was kind of like, this could be the next great adventure for me. And I talked to some other friends of mine who were older when they had kids, close to or over 40, because I really wanted to know about that experience, because I think it is unique from people who have kind of more of a typical path to parenthood, which is a little bit younger. And, they all had really great things to say. When you're older, you have more financial stability, you have more life experience, you have more perspective on the world, you're a little bit more patient about things. And I think all of those things together, I was like, all right, let's try this. But even when I made that decision, I said to Kyle, I can't guarantee anything. Over 40, it's very challenging for women to have children. So, we may be in for a struggle. In the back of my mind, I didn't really believe that myself. I thought, but I'm really healthy, so it's probably going to be fine. I didn't say that out loud, but it ended up being a really big challenge, and it took us 6 years.
Wow. I didn't know it took that long.
Yeah.
And so how old were you, if you don't mind saying, when you had your child, Scarlett?
So I was 47 technically when she was born. Yeah.
Okay. And so what thoughts changed for you too around going from not wanting to have a kid to what is having a child going to do to improve my quality of life, I guess?
I don't know that I ever looked at it as it would improve my quality of life.
Not quality of life, but fulfillment or purpose or...
Yeah, I think there was a piece of me that was like, it's a pretty selfless act. And I kind of felt, and I don't believe the word selfish is a dirty word, but I think I was pretty selfish my entire life, just doing kind of what I wanted to do when I wanted to do it. My time was my own, and it was great. I had a blast.
Yeah.
And it was cool to think about how I could help, a child kind of learn some of the things that I've learned over time, and, maybe give them a solid foundation to have a great life as well. And I honestly, one thought I had was, my life's probably close to halfway over when I first made the decision. We have good longevity genes in my parents, so I'm hoping to make it to 100. But I was like, well, I've done a lot of stuff. What am I going to do with the rest of my life? So I thought this seems like something that would be, and again, because I had a partner who was really passionate about it, I was like, I knew I would have somebody who would be 50-50 with me. And that was always a concern of mine too, because historically women have carried the greater burden. I still think they do. Even with really strong male partners or other partners, it seems to kind of fall on the women to do a lot of the work. And I was kind of like, I'm not going to be the one doing everything here. And I knew that Kyle was going to show up for me in that way. And he has been totally awesome. So I think that was really important to me too. For those people out there who are like parenting single, like, oh, I have so much respect. And that's an amazing, courageous, and badass thing to do.
Yeah, I've lived that life before, witnessing it. And it's being a parent, especially single, is very hard and challenging, and has a lot of different struggles to it that I didn't really know beforehand. But, and then how much of your decision to have a child later on in life was impacted, or how was your health and wellness factored into that?
I think it factored a lot, because I actually presumed that because I was really healthy, I mean, I was a collegiate athlete, I was a gymnast from the age of 5 to 20, and, always stayed relatively fit. I was kind of, because I was a competitive athlete in a very specific sport, it sometimes was hard for me over the years to kind of figure out like how to stay active. I was like, I guess I'll just run. And then, I wish I had gotten into weight training, honestly, sooner than later. But I had been doing CrossFit for a lot of, time before I got pregnant too. And, I just felt like that was going to put me in a situation that was better than maybe other older people who didn't necessarily stay healthy and fit. And I think that was true for the pregnancy itself. But for fertility, it was a big wake-up call for me. And I think the more you read about this now, you'll see that, biological aging is real, particularly certain cells like eggs. And no matter how fit you are and how healthy you are, you can eat organic and, be a healthy body weight and stay fit and get a lot of sleep and all of that stuff. And if your eggs are older and less quality, then you're going to have some struggles. And I think the data are real in terms of the percentages of women over 40 that get pregnant, which is, drops down to the single percentages. It's not impossible. Oh. And there are women out there over 40. I'm in a Facebook group that's like Moms Over 40. And a lot of them have conceived without assistance. And I think it's a sort of biased representation because they're in this Facebook group called Women Over 40 who are moms. But I think it's still unusual, but it's not impossible. And I went through that phase where I was kind of in the hopefulness. I bought a book that was called like Motherhood Over 40. And it was all these individual stories about people who had been able to conceive without assistance. And I was like, oh, that's going to be me. And then the longer it wasn't me, I was like, this is bullshit. So then and I wasn't against using science. I'm a scientist myself. And I remember asking my husband early on, because he was raised kind of religious. And I was like, would you have any issues if we ended up, having to use science? And he was like, well, God didn't smote down the people who created this, so I'm assuming he's okay with it. I was like, well, okay, if that's your perspective, then we're good to go. So, but I think the healthy piece, I was pretty shocked that when I had my first fertility test and the information came back that I had low ovarian reserve, I was like, I don't get it. And they immediately said to me, if you want to be successful, you're probably going to have to use donor eggs. Mm-hmm. And I was like, that's insane. I'm so healthy. And everybody who looks at me is like, you're not that age. Everybody thinks I'm younger than I am. Everybody's always said that about my mom too. I'm like, but we have these great genes. We look so much younger. And they're like, well, your eggs don't,
Mm-hmm. Now, is there science to support that, like living a healthy lifestyle and all that, though, could help preserve the quality and quantity of your eggs, or no?
It's not there. There are probably some people out there who are going to argue this, but there's also a lot of people making money off of very desperate women who want to be able to conceive without assistance. And it's not just wanting to have, your biology and your child or not using assistance. It's expensive. So not everybody can access the assistance. It's getting better. So, I don't want to dismiss the fact that if you needed it, you could easily get it, because not everybody can. So for some people, it's helpful to hear things like, well, if you just take these supplements, things like DHEA or ubiquinol that have been there's sort of some data out there, and it's kind of like, they're sponsored by some of the people who make these supplements. Yeah. And, there are people out there who are making a lot of money trying to help women improve the quality of their eggs. But at this point, we don't really have the data to support that. Now, I've also grown in my opinions as a scientist that we don't have to have a randomized controlled trial for everything and to think that something might work. It might work. It's kind of one of those, if it won't harm and might help, sure, try it, and don't get your hopes up that it's going to cure something that's, kind of not documented.
Yeah. And then what are the risk factors really for people that don't know let's talk about 35.
Yeah. It's moved to 36 now.
Oh, they moved it up again. Yeah. Great. Because I'm 33 and having been dating for a while, it's like every girl is like, I want a kid, and then I'm 33 and like, you got 2 years, pal. It's like, whoa, like, do we need to rush into having a child by 35, or are there still a significant increase in risks after the age of 35 of conceiving?
There's slightly lower rates of conception after 35, and then they start to drop dramatically after 38, and again after 40. You're kind of in those single digits percentage wise. But the other risk is chromosomal abnormalities become much more common. And the thing that we don't talk about a lot too is even in people who are in their 20s, 1 out of every 4, let's say, conceptions will end in either a miscarriage, or it will you won't even know that you're pregnant. There might be fertilization that happens, and it's, if the chromosomal abnormalities are already there, the body kind of takes care of it. And that's sort of, what happens with miscarriages too, is it's sort of the natural biological way of saying this is not a viable pregnancy, and it's horrible. But that's more likely to happen the older you get, because the egg quality is decreased and there's just more increased risk of chromosomal mutations and things like that. So
does that start happening around the age of 35 still, or is it?
It increases starting after that age, which is why they've kind of documented that. So it's not something that you can predict either. When you do something with assistive reproductive technology like IVF, you can actually test for those things. And we chose to do that. It's, of course, an additional cost as well. So the more information you want, the more it costs. Yeah. I would say, going back to your question, and I love hearing this question from a man, obviously, because it's like, well, maybe you do want a family, but gosh, I just met this person and we don't even have like a strong foundation for our relationship yet, which is crucial if you're going to be raising a family.
Yep.
And it's unfortunate and it's not fair that there is this kind of clock going for women. I think the first thing that people could do more of, and there's more access to this too, is just get information about their fertility. And there are groups online that are selling tests that are pretty, inexpensive, that will give you some of that information. You can look at things like follicle stimulating hormone just to see if you're sort of not close to menopause, which, and unfortunately there are people in that like 30 to 35 age group now where we are seeing infertility. A lot of this we want to think about too is like, what's our environment look like compared to what our parents' environment was? So I hope people don't feel like it's their fault that they've done anything. So when you ask about lifestyle and things like that, you could probably be perfect. And yet we're kind of assaulted with a lot of things that people in the previous generations were not. And we have endocrine disruptors all everywhere. Over, exposing that we're exposed to, fertility, puberty is at an earlier onset than it ever was before. We have obesity that also kind of contributes to that kind of stuff. So it's a lot of things that are out of your control. And I just want to emphasize that because I also lead a fertility support group, and people are they're younger and younger, the people who show up to the support group. I mean, hardly any time do I see someone who was like my age.
Really?
Yeah. And so these are women in their 30s and they have unexplained infertility, which is probably the most common diagnosis and the most frustrating one because you can't point to anything that you could actually fix. And so you end up trying a lot of different things. And it's the acronym for assisted reproductive technology is ART, right? So And it's so true. It's more than an art than a science. So I would say getting information sooner than later. And one of the things that you can have done too is called an anti-Mullerian hormone assay. And that is a predictor of your ovarian reserve. And it's not, 1-to-1, like 100%, but it's enough that this is what people use kind of if you were going to go see a fertility specialist. And I'm not sure you could even probably get it from your OBGYN. And it would give you a number, and that number is sort of suggestive of how many eggs you have left in reserve. Importantly, it does not distinguish between quality eggs and non-quality eggs. So it's just going to tell you the number. So you could have a shit ton of eggs, but they might be poor quality, and we don't have good tests for that right now.
And then, so when you say ART or assistive reproductive technology, is that the same as IVF? Is that
it's inclusive of IVF, but also IUI, so intrauterine insemination, which is one of the first things that people will try typically because it's a lot less invasive. It requires a lot less medication and things like that. But yeah, anything that's sort of outside of the typical process of conceiving.
Gotcha. And then, with the younger people too, like I see and hear a lot of women now in their 30s, even younger, talking about PCOS, endometriosis, all these other things. So how big of a factor are those in fertility?
It's a great question. And also, this is part of the larger issue with women's health in general. And when I say women's health, I talk about every cell in the body has a sex, and so it's not just about reproduction, but everything, your heart, your lungs, everything is different when you have two X chromosomes versus an X and a Y. And this is something that we've completely dismissed in the way we've done research and the way we practice medical care. It's getting better. There's definitely more conversations happening about this, but things like PCOS and endometriosis have historically had super long diagnostic journeys. So patients are either dismissed, or with PCOS, it's actually a misnomer. It's like polycystic ovarian syndrome, but not every person with PCOS actually has cysts in their ovaries. So I've actually been involved with groups in the past who are trying to change the name of that because it doesn't make any sense. So if you don't see cysts on the ovaries, a doctor might say, well, you don't have PCOS, right? But if you have all these other symptoms, then and they're not thinking about that as a diagnosis, it can take a really long time to get there. And same thing with endometriosis. People say, oh, my periods are really heavy or they're really painful. They go, okay, we'll put you on the pill. And it's just sort of an instantaneous, like, this should solve your symptoms, but nobody's thinking about the origin of those symptoms. And honestly, even for myself, I was on the pill for like 20 years, and there's no data to suggest that long-term use of oral contraceptives has an impact on fertility, because I can see in your mind you're thinking about that.
Sounds interesting.
Well, the number of women who are on them and are able to get pregnant later on in life is probably higher. Is probably high enough to suggest that it may be individual, but I don't think there's like a class effect of this. So where was I going with this? So the idea that I was on the pill for a long time, and anytime I tried to go off it, I also had really like horrible periods, super painful. And so I think back to that now, and I'm like, I wonder if that was some kind of symptom of like my own fertility. And, those are the kinds of things I think we need to be looking at early on when people are presenting with like super, painful periods or heavy menstrual bleeding. What is the origin of that? And a lot of times people will just mark it off as, well, did your mom have that? Okay, it's probably just genetic. And it's like, but what else could be going on here?
Yeah. And, doesn't it hormonally too change what's happening within the actual structure? So like, doesn't it like thicken the membrane walls and everything, which can make it
you have
harder?
Extra tissue, and you have, endometriosis is endometrial tissue growing outside of the uterus. And so, but yeah, it's absolutely going to change the internal environment too.
But even just using birth control, I'm saying.
I don't know about that.
Okay.
Yeah.
I've heard that from some women before that I've had that were going through the process of IVF and all that.
Yeah.
So interesting that
I was actually told when I came off the pill that there would be a short period of time where I would be like hyper fertile as a result of coming off it, even after the length of time that I was on it. That was from an OBGYN. So again, I think this is one of these things that we just haven't studied enough, and there's probably not enough information out there, but
yeah. And the whole geriatric pregnancy piece, or what was the term you used for it that we're calling it now?
Advanced maternal age.
Advanced maternal age. So What is your thought on the whole geriatric pregnancy thing of like people?
First of all, I think that term needs to go in the garbage immediately.
Yeah. You're not geriatric at 35.
No. But your eggs might be, I guess. I don't know. I think it's a terrible term. I think it's demeaning. I think there are so many women who are taking care of themselves more. I mean, even with exercise, we know that like women were limited, years and years ago, like, women weren't even in like gym class. It was only for boys, I mean, we're talking like decades ago, obviously. But women are very like interested in taking care of themselves now and are doing a better job of it. And we have like great like health guidance for that. So I think in my experience, when I first walked into we graduated from the IVF clinic and we went to the first appointment at a general practice for obstetrics. And I said, I walked in and this woman looked at me and she goes, "Oh my God, I saw that I had at the time I was still 46. I saw that I had a 46-year-old coming in on my chart today." And I was like, "Oh dear Lord." And I was like, and she goes, "But you're healthier than like the 20-something-year-olds that I see." And I was like, "I know. So can we please stop treating me like I'm, this like risk factor walking around for your practice?" And I was like, "I do CrossFit, 3 times a week. And if I'm not doing CrossFit, I'm running or doing, I was like, I just don't my blood pressure is beautiful. My cholesterol, like I have no risk of like diabetes. Like it was really frustrating for me because everything they did was just based on this protocol. And similarly with labor and delivery, if you're in that advanced maternal age group, you're immediately going to be scheduled for an induction at 39 weeks because they don't want you to go too long into the pregnancy. Because one thing that they have shown a risk for is placental degradation can happen earlier in women of advanced maternal age. Now, I looked this up because I didn't really want to be induced. I was like, I would love to have one of these things for me be, typical. And so I looked up the guidelines on this, of course, but not everybody knows how to do this. And with guidelines that are put out by the American College of Obstetrics and Gynecology, they look at the data and then they grade it and they say, we're going to put out these guidelines. Some of the data are high quality and we'll give it a 3, let's say. Some of it are low quality and we're going to give it a 1 because the studies don't really support this, but we're going to do it anyway. And so the quality of data for that set around placental degradation was low. And so when I went in for one of my prenatal appointments and this OBGYN was talking to me about, okay, let's schedule your induction date. And I was like, can we talk about that? And I tried to be very respectful. I didn't Did
you tell her you're a PhD researcher?
I waited until she gave me some shit. And then I was like, by the way, I'm a scientist and I read the guidelines and I know the data quality that support that particular guidance are low. And she kind of stopped in her tracks and she was like, well, that's true. They are low. But, well, what do you want me to do? I mean, she's like, this is still the practice that we have here. And I was like, can you just work with me a little bit? Like, can I try to get myself to go into labor on my own before, you schedule this induction for no good reason, really? And apparently there's no way to like check the placenta. Cause I was like, is there any way to see what's going on in there to see if there's any potential like to detach? And she's like, we don't have that technology even with ultrasound. So, and it goes back to, and I told you I was listening to your podcast with Brianna Battles, and there's so much fear. And when you get to that level, I'm like, look, you're the expert. You've done way more deliveries than I have. If this is what you really think I need to do, I will do it. I'm just asking for, some sort of compromise here where I can feel a little bit empowered with my own birth, right? But you are kind of caught between this rock and a hard place. You're like, we made it all the way here and I'm going to fight this. And then what if something happens? Yeah. Because stillbirth is the other risk that they say can happen in these cases too, if the pregnancy is going too long. And so those things are tricky because there's a little bit of data that's going to create a lot of fear in the docs and they're going to have them put in place these, policies where they're protecting themselves. And I get it. Right. So
yeah, it's the same in all medicine too. Like I saw a post yesterday of this bodybuilder went to a PT clinic and this PT was posting a video asking about, his movement patterns and what it could be, this and that. And then someone wrote it in there. He got hurt doing like chest press or something. And a PT in there wrote like, well, what was he doing for weight? It's like, how is that relative? Or how does that matter? Like what might tear someone else's rotator cuff is not going to tear yours.
Right.
Or this guy's that's lifting all the time and doing this and that. So like, how can you sit behind a computer screen and judge what he's lifting, his strength and how that increased his risk of tearing something. Same in this realm of like, people see a number, it's like, well, you fit this thing, so we need to do it this way because that's just how we do it.
It's insane. And I know a couple of literally elite level athletes who are in their, that 35, 36 range who are pregnant. These two women that are friends of mine, both of them experience the same thing. They get white coat hypertension. And so the other risk with advanced maternal age pregnancies, preeclampsia risk goes up. So they do things like preventive baby aspirin, which again, I was sort of looking at the data when they sent that to me. I don't like to take anything unless I really need to. And I was like, I know it's baby aspirin, but still, I was like, do I really need to be taking this? And again, the data were sort of like meh, but preeclampsia is like, you don't want to get preeclampsia. And so I was like, okay, I guess I'll take it. But these two women that I knew, again, elite level athletes, white coat hypertension, testing their blood pressure at home, completely fine. And then, but they go into the doctors and it's like, yep, exactly. And so for one of them, they had to they're like, you're staying here. The last time she had it, and her babies were born early as a result. And this other woman who's still kind of pregnant right now.
Did they need to come out early, or did they just come out early because she had white coat syndrome?
It was because she had white coat syndrome. So in the hospital, her blood pressure was like spiking really high. And they were just like, we're not taking the chance. Even though if like she went at home, it would probably have been fine. So, and then the same thing happened with this other woman who also happens to be a nurse practitioner. And so she's being told like, hey, I'm really worried about this, and you're going to need to go for additional monitoring from now on. And she's like, but I've been taking it at home under the monitoring of her own nurse practitioner that was like overseeing her besides the OBGYN. And she's like, my numbers are beautiful when I'm at home, So there's just little things like that they're just not going to take the risk. And it's a liability, as we know. And for me, I also had to go to extra monitoring every 2 days a week for the last couple months of my pregnancy. I had to go in for these non-stress tests to make sure the baby was still like moving around. I'm like, I feel her moving every day. Can't you just take my word for it? And it's just, I was actually not working at the time, so it was fine. But I was like, imagine if I was still full-time working and I had to make time to go to these extra appointments when my blood pressure was still in like the 110, 120 range, even while pregnant. And, there was no reason for me to doing these tests other than this is protocol because of your age.
Sucks.
Yeah, it did. I'd go from CrossFit to like here I am, put your little testing monitor on me because I'm so unhealthy.
Yeah. And so with testing though, right? So we've had plenty of advancements in medicine, which are very good for us, right? What things can they do now to make sure you're going to have a fairly unrisky pregnancy or childbirth?
Once you're already pregnant or beforehand?
Let's go through both. So let's start with like what they can do beforehand and then what they can do during. Yeah,
I think number one, if somebody's thinking about getting pregnant, it's a good time to just start that conversation with a healthcare provider, and one that takes a more holistic approach, right? So, I remember my OBGYN saying, that was the first person I talked to about it when I was like, hey, I had my thyroid checked, first of all. So that was one thing because I had been subclinical low thyroid for years. And I knew my mom's hypothyroid. So I knew like eventually it was probably going to happen. They even tested me for the antibody, but I was never treated for it because I didn't have any symptoms. And so all my TSH levels came back like what they called subclinical low. And when I went to the OBGYN and was like, I think I want to try to get pregnant, she was like, thyroid hormone levels are really important in pregnancy. So even if you haven't been treated previously, we should probably put you on a dose of Synthroid, like the lowest dose. And when I went to the IVF clinic, they said they actually ended up bumping it up more. So what I learned was that it's more important for maintaining a pregnancy than for getting pregnant. So if you have low thyroid levels and you're pregnant, it could be a risk factor for miscarriage. So that's something, if there's anything in your family history, that's definitely something to check. And it's such an easy one. And it's such an easy like medication to take and like really no side effects or anything like that. So that was one thing that didn't even occur to me because I had always just been told like, oh, someday you're going to need this. But once I started wanting to get pregnant, they were like, we should make sure that these levels are good just for...
Is there a reason too they chose Synthroid over actual like a bioidentical hormone like Just T3, T4?
Probably just its general practice. I don't think most people practice the way you're talking about, unless it's concierge medicine.
Yeah, the functional medicine people. I did a whole podcast on this. Synthroid is a synthetic that's patented by Big Pharma.
Yeah,
and it does have some utilization, but a lot of the times people will do much better if they just take T3, T4, which are your bioidentical hormones, because they're actually, your body recognizes them as actual hormone versus something that it has to transfer and metabolize in different ways.
I mean, that makes a lot of sense. I wish I had kind of thought of that at the time. I think you're also in this seat of, this is what I really want. If this is, you're telling me this is what I need to do, this is what I'm going to do. And we did go through a time period actually before we went to IVF where I had met with a functional medicine specialist who thought she could help improve the quality of my eggs. Looking back now, I think that was a very desperate sort of hope sort of situation. It was very expensive. I don't think we got very much out of it. They did all the initial testing on both me and Kyle, and she was like, wow, you're two of the healthiest people I've ever worked with. And so I was like, okay, cool. But then all of a sudden it was like, but you should still take all of these supplements. And I was like, but why? And how are we like measuring any kind of change here? And of course, then I tried IVF with my own eggs first, and it didn't work. We tried 2 rounds. The first round just didn't even, like, nothing happened. And then the second round, we got 1 egg, it fertilized, and then it never made it to an embryo. So after that, we could have kept going. The doctor was like, we could try again. Like, it was getting better, but like, it was still pretty low in terms of chances. So we were like, I'm getting older. I don't really want to deal with this. But all of that to say, I think that, there's a timing issue also when you're thinking about doing these kinds of things. But I think if you have information like you just said up front, and you can make some of those choices that might be better and might actually improve your outcomes, then it's definitely worth looking into. And this is why, going back to your question about what can people do when they're starting to even think about it, like a little bit earlier, for me, that wasn't the thing. Like at 35 was still not interested at all. And I didn't even think I ever would be. I would say if people are even a little bit like maybe someday, these are the kinds of things that would be good to talk about and just be in a good physical fitness routine, because you can't really start once you're pregnant you can start, but you can't be like at the level that you might want to be. You know what I mean? Like you can't be like, okay, I think I'll start doing CrossFit now. Or
no. It's amazing too, seeing Meg in the gym.
Yeah, I know she's pretty badass. She's
killing it right now. Her first pregnancy, she kind of stopped working out like right around when she got pregnant and didn't train for 9 months. And when she came back to me, I think she was like 3 or 4 months postpartum. She couldn't do a bridge. She couldn't like roll over. She had a ton of pain everywhere. Yeah. And I think she learned her lesson. It was like kind of a wake up call for her. In her second pregnancy, she trained through it. And now she's on her third. She's competing Saturday with you.
I know, it's awesome.
At 30 weeks pregnant and like doing awesome.
Yeah.
And just functionally, like, I'm so excited to see how well she does post pregnancy, because she's been like just so strong leading up to this.
Yeah.
And like how much more function she's going to have just like in like hit the ground running after that, much easier than before.
Yeah. And what Brianna talks about is like, and I think it was even one of her posts that I saw one day that just made me feel so much better, which was like, just because you were in amazing shape before or even during your pregnancy does not mean that your postpartum period is going to be easy. Yeah. And it was like a really validating thing for me, because so if we back up to even the fertility treatments for us, there were times like that functional medicine person said, you probably could stand to like gain a little bit of weight, honestly, because like this body fat range, seems to be a little bit. And at the time I'd been like exclusively lifting. And so I was like pretty muscular and lean. I wasn't like low body fat or anything, but it was lower than she thought I should be. And so she's like, you could stand to gain a few pounds. Well, I took that as like carte blanche to eat whatever the fuck I wanted. So that was COVID year too. So it was like, I was like baking brownies and, that, and I was also like, not training is hard because all this stuff got in my head, and people were like, well, with all that strength training, your testosterone's probably really high. Maybe that's affecting your fertility. And I was like, all right, I know better than this. And still, I'm like, but what if they're right? What if we've all been wrong this whole time, you know? And so I didn't really train much during that time period. And even when I had like the first couple of embryo transfers, I was like, oh, I'll just walk or whatever. And I talked to a friend of mine who had also gone through IVF, and she's like, I had a whole bunch of failures until I finally was, and she was a runner, and she was like, I had stopped running, I'd stopped doing my regular fitness routine. And finally I was like, fuck it. Like, this isn't working anyways. So I'm just going to go back to doing what I love to do and what makes me feel better mentally and physically. And she's like, and of course, after that is when it worked. Yep. And I kind of did the same thing. I was like, for the third one, the third transfer, so we had 2 failed embryo transfers, and we can talk a little bit about like IVF and the expectations versus the reality. But I was like, yeah, I'm kind of done. Like, if this kid's going to stick, she's got to stick in a body that's working out, and that's going to be my life, and that's going to be my pregnancy. So, you know what? Kid, embryo, whatever, like
parasite.
I'm a parasite. Yeah. I'm going to be working out. We're going to try this transfer thing. If it bothers you that I'm working out, then we're probably not going to be a good fit anyways. So I went back to like CrossFit for, you know, like 6 months before we did that last embryo transfer. And I'm actually, might have been longer than that. And I continued to like just work out the entire pregnancy, and I felt amazing. And everybody kept saying, oh, you know, this is awesome. You're going to bounce back so quickly because you're doing so great during your pregnancy. And I think that was true for like the first couple months. And then like the sleep deprivation, I think that was probably the biggest key for me. It was like, I just couldn't like get it going. Yeah. And then little things hurt because I was like, I was holding the baby for so long. My wrists were all fucked up, and people were like, oh yeah, that's called mommy wrist. I'm like, this is a thing. Nobody told me about this. Yeah. It was awful. I was like, somebody should have told me like ergonomically what I should be doing with this baby. And then after that, I like got some weird like SI joint bullshit because I was like feeling so good that I was like, I'm going to do like a 2 a day. And then I was like, what just happened? And that just set me back again. And I just think that it can be a longer journey than you're expecting. And most women that I've talked to are like, I think it was like a year before I actually felt like myself again. And I'm like, that's kind of where I'm at.
Yeah, it's way more traumatic than people assume. I think sometimes, like, yes, it's this natural part of life that we just do and then move on from. It's like, no. Like, just orthopedically, we have to think of it a little bit differently. Of like, this is like undergoing a like major traumatic like sports injury, but worse. Yeah. Of it's taking a toll on you for 9 months leading up to it. Like, all of your muscles and ligaments and everything are being stretched, torn sometimes. And your whole center of mass has changed. The way you walk and the strip bones you stress are different. Then to the hormonal part of like, you have all these fluctuations in hormonal levels now, which affect your joints too, to bouncing back after that. Like, your body's in a whole different state, and managing a new child, sleeping or lack thereof. Like, it's a lot to manage. Yeah. And then the mindset of it too, probably, of, I can't put myself in those shoes, but like, I can imagine it'd be very infuriating to some women that are like in very good shape. Yeah. And then like, they can't do nearly half of what they were doing before. Oh yeah. Yeah. And add on top of that too. So it doesn't stop at like the delivery or even like so if you're breastfeeding, the hormones that support breastfeeding also fuck up like all of your joints and your mood and everything else. So I was told by my GYN, she was awesome. Like, when I ended up having a C-section, and in the OR after she like sewed me up, I was like, do you have any concerns? And she's like, my concern for you is that you're going to feel too good too quickly, and you're going to want to like go back to the gym. And when I saw her for my 2-week appointment, I was like, so what do you think? And she's like, you can go back to the gym. You just can't lift anything heavier than 10 pounds. She's like, but if you just want to go to the classes and like move. And it was great. So she really like empowered me to like not be afraid. And she's like, I think you're doing really well. And I think you set yourself up well with like the way you took care of yourself before, this event. But then she did say, she's like, I just want to warn you that like the hormones associated with breastfeeding are going to make it pretty hard for you to like get lean. And like, she's like, you're going to be a little squishy for a while. And she's like, and it probably won't go away. You won't see like that kind of like body composition change until
you completely stop breastfeeding. And I was like, that's good to know. And it was good that she set that expectation. So all of those things together. So it's just, how long you spend doing that, the whole postpartum period in general, like when do you actually have time to go to the gym? When Scarlett was a like tiny little thing, I could just take her and she'd sleep the whole time and I could do a CrossFit workout. But once she started getting like engaging with the world, it was like,
Monster.
the coaches were awesome. They would like walk her around while she was screaming in the stroller while I was working out. And they were so great about it. But I was like, this is not help. This isn't feel good to me because I'm like, other people are like jumping in to like soothe her. And I'm trying to get my workout in. And I was like, yeah. So then I kind of took a break for a while too. So you have to kind of, to me, it's been a little bit of a roller coaster up and down, but
for sure.
try to give yourself a little grace.
Yeah. And then, so on the breastfeeding topic there, other risks of an advanced maternal age mother breastfeeding?
Such a great question because I had a hard time with my supply early on. It was like, I'm like, another fucking thing. Like, can we just catch a break? So my supply was low. And we actually ended up using some donor milk in the hospital because the hospital was very like anti-formula, anti-bottles, all this stuff, which I think is absolute crap to be telling women at this phase in their life because it is so hard no matter what. And there's no like really good data on like long-term effects of like breastfed babies versus formula babies in terms of like intelligence or things like that.
Really?
Yeah. So now they've got like 5-year data to show that there's really no difference.
Oh, that's interesting because I like 5 years ago or so, it was like, I kind of saw that thing. Like a lot of my friends were having kids and stuff. It's like, and everyone now breastfeeds.
They if you can. So here's the thing, like number one, it's not easy for everyone to do. I'm a good example of that. And I'm in another Facebook group that's like, breastfeeding for like the low supply and it has like, I don't know, 50,000 people in it or something. So clearly I'm not the only one. It's also, and we can talk, it's a ton of mental load on you as well. Like they have to feed 10 times a day at the beginning, right? So it's like, if that's what you're doing and if your supply is low, like mine was, I was feeding and then pumping and then giving her the bottle of pumped milk. And then by the time you finish that, they're ready to eat again. So you are seriously like around the clock. And then even when she was able to sleep through the night, I had to continue getting up at like 2:00 in the morning to pump because guess what? Your hormones are highest and produce the most milk between 2 and 4 a.m. because that's fucking convenient, right? Like, so I would like for all of the time period that she was sleeping still, I was still not getting any sleep. So And that was me saying like, I'm going to do this because I felt like my body wasn't involved in like the process of like, the conception. I carried her obviously, but I think that was my own kind of stuff that I was like attached to the idea of like, all right, this is the one thing that my body's actually going to do. There were people that said, your milk may be coming in later because of your age. I haven't found any information to support that. And I don't know if maybe it's just like the long period of time before your body is like told to do that. Cause I've heard that, people with like their second and third kids, like, it comes a lot easier. Like the milk comes in quicker, things like that. So I don't know what the actual data are on that, but I don't, it may be an age thing. But in terms of risks, not that I know of.
So they're not showing many differences in breastfeeding a child versus water.
No. So you'll talk to people who are really biased about this that will probably say one way or the other. But I think from my perspective, like I'm just a big supporter of women in general. And so whatever works for you, like your baby will be fine. And people kept saying that to me. And we kept formula in our cabinet because I was like, I do not want to be one of those people who's just like dies on that hill, like literally potentially could die because I'm so tired and I'm so pissed and I'm, so frustrated. And like, if we got to that, it was just going to be like, okay, like if I can't make any milk, then like she needs something. So we just got to feed her. And that does happen for some people. So I think we have to just be careful about, saying like, oh, this is better than that. Because I was a formula fed baby and I think I'm pretty awesome.
I'm a formula fed baby and I have a bunch of autoimmune issues. So who knows?
Yeah. Yeah.
But there's multiple different factors for that.
Yeah.
But I thought like, breastfeeding was the way to go because that's what was like touted a few years ago. I think like when I was in college, it was a big thing in nutrition of like, here's all these extra benefits you get from breastfeeding versus not, or using the bottle.
So I'm going to plug a book that's really good for anyone. So the woman is named Emily Oster, and she's, I think she's an economist. When she first got pregnant, she was getting all of the guidance like, oh, don't let your heart rate go above 140. And like, you shouldn't drink at all, and alcohol. And so she was like, where's the data on all this stuff? So she wrote, her first book is called Expecting Better. And it's all about the guidance that you get during pregnancy, and she breaks it down by the data, doesn't like have an opinion either way. She's just like, if you want to have your glass of wine, here's the data on alcohol in pregnancy and what the reality of it is. So she talks through all of that stuff. And then her second book is called Crib Sheet. And it's that one also incorporates some of the stuff about breastfeeding. And she talks about the immune effects on things like ear infections. And so the data that are out there are going to look at specific things. And one of them is like, let's take ear infections, for example, because a lot of babies get those. Like, is there any difference between formula fed or breastfed? And like, they'll look at it in terms of like the first couple of months. So there are time periods that supposedly have more of an impact than others. So it's like, if you can breastfeed even for the first month, your baby gets like a lot of great, immune support, theoretically. And if you can make it to 6 months, then like, that's a great like gold standard. But like, if you go beyond that, sure, it's great. The lactation consultant that we worked with said that there are actually benefits for the mom beyond 6 months, including protection against some cancers. So, do your research, but like those two books are a really good place to look for somebody who's done it for you and put it in a really nice layman's terms. So yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Something I did not know.
Yeah.
What are some of the other big misconceptions and myths out there about advanced maternal age pregnancy?
So one of the things I hear that actually kind of like makes me sad a little bit is like, you hear people say like, oh, is it fair to have a child when you're older because they're not going to have as much time with you? And I was like, I thought of that. Somebody asked me what the biggest impact was when Scarlett was born. And I was like, honestly, the second she was born, I immediately thought about when I was going to die and how much time I had with her. I know,
Morbid.
Super dark, right? Yeah. I'm going to blame the hormones on that one.
Okay.
but I do think about it. I mean, there's times where I'm like going through the math in my head, and in this group that I'm in with like the over 40 moms, and I'm also part of like an egg donor moms group, and they talk about this a lot too. And it's just like, first of all, now the data show that women who have kids over the age of 40 are 4 times more likely to make it to 100.
Really?
Yeah. And if you think about it, you have motivation. Like a lot of people, this is the season of life where like they're empty nesters and they're like, what do I do with myself? I've just been raising children for the last, 20 years and now they're gone. And so what am I going to do? So one, I think it's really important for people who start earlier to like make sure you have a plan for yourself too, and like some goals and things that you really are passionate about. And even if you have to put them on pause, what are you going to come back to once the kids don't need you as much, And then for older people, it's kind of like, well, this is kind of cool. Like I have the rest of my life to really help support this child and hope that I can leave them in a situation where they've got some good values and principles and guidance. And, it does motivate me to take care of myself.
Yeah.
So I think that's a benefit of it. But it's, and of course anything can happen to anyone at any time. So that's another way to look at life.
Yeah. Yeah. My dad's an example. He had me later on in life, I guess. And then he had my twin brothers at 48.
Right.
And he coached me playing hockey since I was 3 till I was like, I don't know, 16, 17. He's like, you're on your own now. But then my brother, who was 10 years younger than me, played hockey from when he was 3 all the way through high school. My dad was his coach most of the way through that.
Wow.
So I think my dad was coaching hockey up until he was like 64, multiple times a week on the ice and everything. That's something that kept him healthy. And even now, he's had all kinds of surgeries and, he's 70. So with 23-year-old boys, but it definitely has been a vehicle to keep him healthier longer and keep him, and now we're starting to hold him accountable. Like, Dad, you need to do this. Dad, you need to do that, whatever.
Yeah.
Where I don't know how different things would have looked for him had he had us way younger.
Yeah, I think that's a great example. And then the next generation too. So my parents are in their 80s. And so they have a grandchild that could be their great-grandchild technically.
Yeah.
But oh my God, she just lights up their world. We FaceTime them at night and, they have kind of their routine, but part of it now is just like they could watch her on FaceTime just playing in her playroom for like an hour and they're just laughing at her and they're also motivated to take care of themselves. So like my mom had some issues. You actually worked with her a little bit.
Yep.
And now if she has pain, she's like, I'm going to go get it checked out because I got to be there for my granddaughter. And she'll really use that as her motivation too. And so again, I feel the same way. So I think that that's a benefit. I think the community piece might be a little tricky. Like when I see other moms, I'm kind of like, what was that girl, like 14 and she has a kid? And like, no, she's probably 30. And I'm like, just my perspective is so different. And I'm like, I see these moms that are a lot younger and I'm like, am I going to be able to relate to them or because people as adults who have children, typically their community ends up being your kids' friends' parents, right? So, I'm always curious about that too. Now, I'm a people person. I think I can talk to anybody, any age, any background, whatever. And I love being around different types of people. So I hope it'll be okay. But I do have a little bit of fear around that, around like, are they just going to be like, who's this old lady with the terrible clothing style and everything?
And then did you ever have any fears too about, as you age, like something happening, you not being able to take care of your daughter and things like that? Because that's one thing for me where I think about with ankylosing spondylitis and that, and like there is a degradation of my joints happening. That's kind of inevitable. I do my best to maintain that, but it's like, damn, like the longer I wait here, it's like, I don't know, like I have this thought in the back of my head that like, maybe at some point, like my back just gives out and I become this miserable human being that's just plagued with pain all the time that like would be a horrible parent.
I don't think you'd be a horrible parent regardless of what, the fact that you're thinking about that tells me that you have the right priorities and focus there. I do think about it, but again, it's a motivator, I think, for us to take care of ourselves the best that we can. I mean, when you have something that's like a degrading condition and, you don't know what direction it's going to go, right? Like there's a lot of variability in how it presents in each person. And just having that conversation, I think communication with your kids is really important from an early age, even if they're so little, you're like, they can't possibly know what I'm saying. Somehow I feel like it's getting in there. And if you just also keep repeating it for yourself too, I think it's helpful. You do the best you can. Because again, like anything can happen at any moment to anybody. And there's people out there who are a lot younger, who aren't taking care of themselves at all, who are not able to get down on the floor with their kids, who are not able to run after them, who are not feeding them the way that they should be so that they get the most nourishment and energy and focus and all of those kinds of things. So, not that it's like a comparison, but kind of it is. I mean, you sort of do have to look at like what you're doing right, and you're doing everything to optimize your ability to have that. And that's how I look at it too, is, when I see these posts, sometimes they're like, I think it's really unfair for people to have children that late in life. Because, it's like, my sister-in-law's mom died when my sister-in-law was 17, so that stuff happens and you figure out how to, live your life that way. I mean, it's not ideal, but, And I also like to teach, I want to teach my kid that family goes beyond biology. And there's going to be like a really core story around that for her too, because my DNA is not in her. And at some point I'm going to have to explain that to her and that we had this really amazing person who gave us the opportunity to conceive her and that it was a gift and that it was really like selfless on the part of this other human being, but it's also a single cell that she was given. Right. And then, fortunately I was able to carry her, which makes it more part of, but some people aren't going to be able to do that either. I mean, if you have same-sex couples who are looking to raise families, those conversations are going to be happening in those areas as well. And it's going to be more and more sort of family building. It's going to have different lenses to it. But I think that piece to it is like biology is not what makes a family. The people that you surround yourselves, your friends, they could be biological as well. But I just find that, we create our community, we create the people that are going to help them out. So like if let's go worst case scenario, you're in a situation at some point where your body isn't doing what you want it to do and you can't run around with your kids, like you're still going to be there for them. Yeah. And, your little brothers might be the ones running around with your kids,
Terrifying. That's interesting to talk about with, the whole donor thing too. So like, how does that work? Like, do you get to pick like you're, it's like a lineup of 10 people, like in a prison almost. Like it's that one.
Yeah.
Or how does that all work?
So
these are all the things like no one really like. I have no clue about.
So let's like take a step backwards on that one in terms of like how we actually switched to the donor path. So as I've mentioned, I was already 40. We tried for a year, to conceive. And then we're like, okay, they say after a year, you should go to see a reproductive endocrinologist. I would say and I think the guidance now is if you're over 36, let's say like maybe even over 35 and after a year of trying and like tracking your ovulation cycles and all that kind of stuff, you're unsuccessful at conceiving, then you should go see a reproductive endocrinologist. Get those initial tests, just make sure nothing's going on. It may be nothing, but it's better to get that information sooner or later. So by the time I did that, we probably should have gone after 6 months. Mm-hmm. And again, the first thing they said to me was, you should use an egg donor. And I was like, absolutely not. This makes no sense to me. I'm too healthy, blah, blah, blah. We decided to, get a second opinion, and they gave us kind of the same opinion and said, you have about a 1% chance of getting pregnant, quote unquote, naturally. I hate that word. So I'd like to say without assistance. You have about a 2% chance of doing IVF with your own eggs, because we're probably not going to get that many, and who knows what the quality looks like. And you have about a 65 to 70% chance of having a baby with donor conceived eggs. And I was like, okay, obviously, if I just look at the stats and am practical about this, we know the option that we should choose. But I still was like, but maybe I'm one of those people who's going to be successful. And the doctor was great. He was like, it's not a 0% chance. And I know a lot of people want to rule this out, like use your own DNA and just see if it works. And he's like, I've seen it happen. So I'm not saying it's zero, but let's have realistic expectations. And I loved that kind of approach because I thought he's allowing me to dream a little bit, but with this side dose of reality, which I really appreciated. Mm-hmm. So we tried that. It didn't work. And again, like I said, we pivoted immediately. We were also open to adoption. And he said to us, we could try another round of IVF. We did get better results. They weren't perfect, but maybe if we keep going. And there are people who will do this 7, 9. There's a famous story out there of a woman who did 40 cycles of IVF and they finally got success. I was like, that's not how I envision my life. I don't really want to do that many times. Everybody's choice is their own. It's also very expensive. So he said, if you want to have a child and you don't care about the biological, makeup of that child, I would say consider donor eggs. If you want to have a child with 100% chance of having a child, then I would say you should adopt, and you don't care about the biology part of it. Right. So I just, again, liked kind of the way he put it in those different perspectives. And so we decided we would choose the donor path. And so there's a couple things you can do. There are banks, just like sperm banks, there are egg banks. Mm-hmm. So you can go online and read these people's profiles. They all write a letter of why they're doing this. You can look at their family history. You can see what color eyes or hair they have, what sports they were involved in when they were younger. So you can actually find a pretty decent
online dating.
Pretty much. Yeah, okay. Exactly. Yeah. And so I actually found someone who matched everything I wanted pretty quickly. I was like, oh, I thought this was going to be really hard, but I was like, I already found somebody. And then we just kind of sat on it for a little while. And then I went back to find her again and she was gone. I was like, oh, right. This is a national egg bank. Everybody's looking for these right now. Yeah. So I was really bummed out. And then
were you trying to find someone too that looked like you?
Kind of, yeah. And what's cool is they'll put their baby pictures and their adult pictures. So so you can see what they look like as a baby. And you're like, does that look like, and I'm like, oh, that kind of look like my baby pictures. And for some people that's important. And for other people, it's not as much. Mm-hmm. And they're all screened and, it's kind of taken care of by an institute of donor eggs or whatever. So then the other way you can do is work with somebody who can place you and find a donor, kind of more concierge style. And then we found ours kind of super randomly, friend of a friend. And she just happened to be having a conversation with this woman. And the woman happened to say, was like, oh, do you have any kids? And the woman was like, no, but I've always wanted to help another couple have kids. And it was a friend. My friend was like, I know a couple who needs some help. Really? And she connected me with her. And it was just this bizarre, I felt like the universe was stepping in. It was like, this is what you're supposed to do. It turned out her name was the same as mine. And I was like, okay, that's another sign. And she's just some amazing, sweet, completely altruistic individual. And we're still in contact with her. She met Scarlett when she was very little. And we stay in touch, and we're kind of like,
I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. But the guidance psychologically for the kid is that you tell them early and make sure they know the story of their conception, because I think previous generations were very much like, we don't talk about things that are uncomfortable or outside the normal, right? And I'm like, let's break that cycle. Yeah. And that's definitely like, because then if they find out later, and especially with things out there like 23andMe, although they just went bust, but they just been bankrupt. They just declared bankruptcy. Okay. Yeah. But like genetic, tests and everything like that are so ubiquitous now. And why would you hide it? So. Well,
there's like that Netflix documentary. Did you see that one on the?
The guy.
He has like 1,000 children, and then was like, the OBG for his daughter that his daughter didn't know that was her father.
Yeah.
I was like,
I didn't realize that part. Oh.
Yeah. Yeah, he had one of his patients
was his kid.
But that she didn't know that until she like did 23andMe, and like it came back to him.
Yeah. So,
but
anyways. I know that was like a nasty example, but yeah. So the donor egg process again. I mean, in that group that I'm on Facebook, the moms over 40. Every time someone posts or introduces themselves, they're like, well, did you conceive naturally? So I sent a message out to the group at one day, and I was like, why do people always ask this question? I'm just curious. And they're like, well, I think it's because we want to know that there's still hope for us to do it that way. So I think ideally we have this historical precedent that your biology gets carried on to your children, which I guess is cool. But as one of my friends says, like, what do people think, they have royal blood or something? It was hard to wrap my head around it initially. And it definitely, I would say, if people are headed down that path, like, just take your time to kind of all along the way, you kind of grieve the loss of the thing that you thought was going to be the way. And then you kind of open up and embrace the fact that well, I'm happy that there's another way. And that we're going to be able to meet this kid, and this is the way we're going to do it. And I had a freak out moment, in my 9th month of pregnancy, where I was like, oh my God, what about when she's 13 and she says, you're not my real mother? I'm like, what will I do? And so I reached out to some people who were moms of kids through egg donation, who were a little bit older. The kids were a little bit older. I'm like, okay, so has this ever happened? And how does this work? And they're like, this is how you do. You have these communications and you talk about it early and often. And, regardless of, how they're conceived, they're probably going to hate you at some point anyway.
Yeah, they will.
But yeah, it's a path that's open, and especially for people who are unable to conceive with their own eggs. And I think we'll see more and more of it, honestly. Yeah.
And I mean, for your own perspective, I guess, from my life's experiences, I had a biological mom that was an alcoholic that from the age of 8, I chose not to talk to.
Yep.
And she died when I was in grad school, and I was still not mad at her anymore, but for a long time I was, or just disappointed. And it's like, I've let go of that now, but I've had a stepmom in my life since I was 8. And granted, there were plenty of times we have not gotten along, but she is the reason I am where I am today. And she's the one that I call her my mom.
Yeah.
I always will.
Yeah.
And so I think there's a lot more, beyond blood,
yes,
that creates a bond with people.
Yeah, totally.
And I have half brothers that are biological, but we're all treated somewhat the same. There are some different things, but we're also raised 10 years apart, different life circumstances and things. So, yes, I don't see it as that big of a deal. And plus, for you, you still carry that baby for 9 months, and you're there's got to be a bond that happens there. There's got to be some biology we can't explain.
Most days, 99.9% of the time, I kind of forget that we use donor conception. It's just, there's no question in my mind that she's mine.
Yeah.
And I think, to your point, I thought about this a lot, those examples, when I was making the decision, and I was like, yeah, there's a lot of parents out there who aren't present, or worse, or abusive, and the biology is there, but it's that's not the most important thing at all.
Yeah.
So, and same thing with friends that you're closer to some friends than you are family members. I totally agree. And thanks for sharing that example. I think it's really powerful.
Yeah.
On that note though, you also asked about egg freezing. So again, if people are getting ahead of themselves in terms of maybe someday I might want I did a little research on this before I came today because it's something that I've been curious about for a while, because with IVF, with any of that stuff, it's a huge numbers game. So the first step is that you do egg retrieval. The number of eggs that you get, you can basically say, let's say it's 10, make it easy. 5 of those will fertilize. Okay. After fertilization, they grow in the Petri dish for 5 days until they become a blastocyst. Put that number in half again. So 2.5, let's say 2 to 3 will actually make it to day 5. Then they'll get frozen. Typically, you can also do a fresh transfer, but and there's no data to suggest that one is better than the other. If you freeze them, you can also do the genetic testing that I was talking about before. So you can actually determine which of those embryos or those blastocysts are viable, and or have chromosomal abnormalities. So then you can determine like which ones are like quality and could be transferred. The transfer process is like a huge black box. Nobody knows like what makes an embryo implant or not implant. So you go in, they put the embryo in, you wait 10 days to see if you're pregnant. And we had 6 embryos. 2 of them were ruled out after we did genetic testing. The 4 that were remaining were frozen. We had 2 transfers that failed. And then the third one finally made it. With a little bit of like intervention in between, like they kind of went back into my uterus and were like, I think there's maybe some scar tissue here that we could like kind of smooth out a little bit. And so let's take care of that and then try again. And so there are some things that can happen in between those, but I just want like the expectation around assisted reproductive technologies to be a little more transparent than I think it is, especially if you're going to go talk to a clinic. Now, the clinics, it's to their benefit to have great data. So there's publicly available data on every clinic on their success rate for different age groups as well. And sometimes they'll deny older women treatment because they don't want it to mess up their stats, because the likelihood of success is lower if you're doing, especially if you're doing IVF with your own eggs. If you're doing IVF with donor eggs, it sort of levels the playing field. You can actually carry even after menopause with a donor conceived embryo. So you can be pregnant and deliver even after, if you're no longer cycling, if you're using donor eggs, or if you now have the option to freeze eggs and that works, it might even be your own eggs. So I think there's been some news stories recently on this where people are like much older and having this was like a woman who was like, had a frozen egg that was like 20 years old or something like that. And ended up, yeah. So, but the thing is, freezing embryos is more likely to lead to success because you've kind of gotten to that process of like, okay, at least we're to the embryo stage. And so if you freeze those, you kind of know what you're working with. You could freeze like 30 eggs. And there was just an article on this. I think it was Chronicle that did it. This woman, like, they were like, oh, wow, we got 30 eggs. This is amazing. So what they're saying now is you want to have at least 20 eggs frozen if that's going to be the path that you take to like in the future, because again, it's a numbers game. Some of them might not survive the thaw. Some of them, probably half of them, won't fertilize. Another half of those won't make it to day 5. And then some of those embryos might not be chromosomally normal. So you want to start with as many as possible. But again, it's not always quantity equals quality. So there was one woman in this story who had 30 eggs retrieved and were frozen. And then like none of them ended up being viable at the end of the day. So when they unfroze them, a bunch of them didn't make the thaw. The ones that did, the ones that made it to embryo, like never survived. Like they were all chromosomally abnormal. So not to say like, I hate to put like the negative part out there. I just am like a realist as well. It's an expensive process. The earlier you start it, the better. So I had a lot of friends, like, because egg freezing became a thing kind of probably when we were in our 30s, like my age group. And so I knew several people who had frozen their eggs when they were like already late 30s, like 38, 39, 40, 41. And one of my friends was like, yeah, I have 6 of them frozen. And I was like, yikes. Like I had already been going through the IVF process at that point. I was like, 6 is not a lot. I didn't say that, but I was like, yeah, there's a very low chance. Like there's a chance. But so this is another thing where like the sooner you do it, the better. So one paper came out recently that said, I think it was from like a 2022 study of clinics that used previously frozen eggs. If you were below the age of 38 and had 20 or more eggs, you had a 70% success rate of getting a pregnancy. And I don't know if it was pregnancy or live birth because they always differentiate those. So this is another thing where it's like, get information earlier. If you think you want to do it, even if it's like a remote possibility, you probably want to start that process sooner than later to give yourself the best chances. But frozen eggs are not an insurance policy that's good, that's going to be guaranteed.
And this is a silly question, maybe. I didn't pay attention that much in some of these science classes I took with you guys. But if say you have 30 eggs, one of those goes through the cycle every time you ovulate and menstruate and all that. But is it just a decreasing number of eggs over time?
Yeah.
Or do you if you harvest them, are they reproduce? Do you build more or no?
Yeah. So this is a really great question because it's an important, even for me, I was like, because somebody asked me this once when we were going through IVF. It's like, well, aren't you like depleted? Like for the donor, for example, isn't it, a risk for her? Because now she won't have as many eggs. And it's like, no, every single cycle, your body produces follicles, a number of follicles. Only one of those becomes the alpha, let's say. There's the dominant follicle is what the technical term is that they use. And that's the one that would get released. And if it was fertilized, it would turn into a pregnancy. But for most of the cycles, if you're not trying to conceive or it doesn't happen, that egg just goes away, but the rest of the follicles just like involute into the cells and they just become part of the menses that gets rid of all the extra tissue and everything. So you're born with as many eggs as you'll ever have. And this was new to me. So I was reading about this too. So it was like at 20 weeks gestational, you have the most eggs that as a fetus that you'll ever have as a female fetus. And then even that starts to decline by the time the baby's born. So when females are born, though, they have all of the eggs that they'll have for their life. And then every cycle you lose not just one, but you lose like
multiple.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So what they're doing in the IVF process is they're stimulating those other follicles to like all become dominant follicles. So instead of one that like beats out the others and those all involute in the natural process in IVF, the follicles are all stimulated to keep growing. So you may get, 10 follicles and there's like a certain millimeter size that they will like kind of say it needs to reach to. And you're hoping that they all kind of grow at the same time and are relatively the same time. But if you have one that's like a super grower and the rest of them are like really behind, then you have to like still do the trigger and do the egg retrieval. And so you might not get as many because you might only have like 3, but they're growing too fast for the other ones. So it's like a real art science kind of thing too with like, it's pretty fascinating.
And then as far as choosing donor eggs.
Yeah.
As we talked about, there's not a ton of testing we can do pre-pregnancy, but you're going to select a donor egg, right? Are there certain things they can now do to rule out risk factors for you or the baby, like long-term, like genetic testing and all that stuff?
For the donor?
Well, for you to take on the donor egg.
Is there any...
Or from the donor egg, like, do they inspect each one of these to be like, this baby is not going to have any type of chromosomal disorder or this and that?
So first of all, like there's strict criteria for who can donate eggs, and it's a very small age range too. Like I don't even think they go past like 31 or 32 for donors.
Well,
they do a big health history on them. I mean, again, you can't estimate quality of eggs in anybody at this point, and it would be the embryo that you'd want to look at for any chromosomal abnormalities. So that's where you kind of have to wait to that stage where the egg is fertilized, it's grown to a blastocyst, and then if you want to check for chromosomal abnormalities before you implant it, that's when you would do that. So they freeze them, they do a biopsy, they take I think it's a single cell maybe even, and then they send that off to a lab and tell you whether there's any. And there's only certain things they can look for, right? So they look for the trisomies that are compatible with life, which is like 21, 18, and 14, I think. And then there's like a list of other things, but it's only about like 300 things that they look at. So it's not going to rule out everything because things can still happen with any kind of
life.
DNA replication. Mistakes can get made. Some of those mistakes you'd never know about because they don't really have a phenotype associated with them, but some of them can still happen. And so there's always risks. Like I think this is another thing, again, not to be like fearful about like pregnancy and conception, but I think for most of the time, and it should be this way really, that people wouldn't worry about it so much. Otherwise we'd have like a really low population. You kind of just assume everything's going to go well. And that's great. I'm so happy for those people that can just be like, oh, we got pregnant and everything's fine. And we have this awesome baby. Oh, now we have 3 and they're all great and they're all healthy. And it's like, but I've been part of a community where I've seen like the worst of the worst. And even outside of like fertility issues, I have a friend who had a spontaneous genetic mutation. Her daughter had a spontaneous genetic mutation and she has severe disabilities for life. And it's, really challenging, obviously, and there's no way to predict that. So there's nothing anybody could have done to stop that from happening. And that happens all the time. Not all the time, but I mean, it's a small percentage, but still it happens. Yeah. So it is more likely to happen with older age. And those would be specific things like the trisomies that have higher prevalence. And then theoretically, if they're a genetic mutation that's not compatible with life, that would end in a miscarriage anyway. And that was like one of the things that we talked about with our doctor, like as to whether we wanted to genetically test the embryos. He was like, well, theoretically, if something was wrong, you would miscarry. And I was like, I'd rather avoid that if I can, which most people can't, choose to avoid that. But like I said, even in healthy pregnancies in women of any age, 25% of those would be non-viable. So that's another statistic that is, I think, not talked about enough. And we don't talk about miscarriages enough and kind of the impact of that, but much higher rates with women over 36 and then even more so after the 40s.
And then was there anything else I had here?
Is this like your typical podcast? I feel like we haven't talked about exercise enough.
I talk about exercise a lot. So yeah, well, let's talk about exercise. This can be my typical podcast, but yeah. So what are your thoughts and outlooks and experiences as far as fertility and exercise?
So number one, I would say do what makes you feel good. And I think just trusting that you're doing a great thing for your body and like trying to minimize the like fear tactics that people give you around that. And we're getting better. I think clinicians are really promoting exercise during pregnancy, and there's no separation of that with like women of advanced maternal age who are getting pregnant. Yeah. If anything, like because of the higher risks of like blood pressure disorders and preeclampsia, like getting a good baseline of fitness and maintaining that. I mean, some people have some genetic association with hypertension, which, is, try to get that controlled, but exercise we know is going to also help with that. So the things that are higher risk for advanced maternal age, a lot of them can be corrected with exercise. Gestational diabetes is a higher risk in advanced maternal age as well. So getting your diet in good form, trying to eat higher protein, lower carbohydrate, and just moving more so that you can also get your, muscle glucose uptake.
Yeah. I was always wondering that we get the preeclampsia and the gestational diabetes. Yeah. How much of that is manageable through like lifestyle and behavior, do you think? Or no, with all your data? Yeah.
I mean, there are people who get gestational diabetes who are really healthy also and are working out and doing the right things. What's interesting, I'm glad we're talking about this too, because what's interesting about gestational diabetes is it's associated with, I'm going to screw up the numbers, but like, let's say 2 to 4 times risk later in life of having type 2 diabetes or cardiovascular disease. The mother or the baby? The mother. Okay. So one of my friends who is a metabolic researcher as well, he used to call it pregnancy is like a stress test for the pancreas. And if you get gestational diabetes, that tells you, I think you mentioned this even when you were talking with Brianna too, about things that are like, or she may have said this, like things kind of show up like pelvic floor wise that may have always been there, but now because you've had this added stressor of pregnancy, like it's revealed itself, right? So there may have already been some like instability or stuff there. And I think that happens with a lot of things, but with pregnancy in particular, this is kind of a window into your future. And I think that's something that we don't think about, because once people leave the OBGYN practice after having, nobody's going to ask you when you're 70, hey, did you ever have gestational diabetes or preeclampsia when you were pregnant? Nobody even thinks about that woman's pregnancy, all those years ago. But if we could actually document that as like a risk factor, then that gives us like something to keep tracking for the mom. And I think especially because just getting older, you have higher risk for insulin resistance. I mean, your pancreas has been working for longer, right? And depending on how you've been treating it, it may have been more abused than others. So I do think it's like, even if that happens to somebody who's typically healthy, I think you should look at it as like, okay, this is something I wouldn't have even known about myself if I hadn't been pregnant. And I need to make sure that I follow this and make sure my physician knows about it, and then like get my shit together even after I have this baby, which is much harder to do because you're tired and like your eating and your exercise are going to probably be off for like at least a year. But just having that in your mind of like the mom needs to think about, what am I learning about myself throughout this process? But if you can avoid that, I do think that you can do the best you can, I would say, when it comes to getting your diet together and making sure that you're moving regularly. More muscle is always better to help with insulin sensitivity as well. So strength training, which hopefully more women are doing now. I think they are.
I'm trying to promote it.
I think it's really important, but I think it's still not the number one priority that people have. But especially as we get older. So I would say focus on strength training in particular, and start it while you're thinking about like, oh, maybe I'll have a family someday. And it's like, well, what can you do besides like, trying to get pregnant, to set your body up for like a good longevity. And especially if you're in that older age frame too, it's like, I haven't really been taking good care of myself because I've been focused so much on my career. And I mean, I'm in the corporate world, and the people I see and the way they take care of themselves or basically don't take care of themselves, I'm just like, it's atrocious. And it's just, you're sitting at your desk all day long. You go to work meetings, you eat like all of this crap that's served to you. People drink like crazy. They're getting terrible sleep. They're on planes all the time, right? And if that's you and you're like, I think I'm 40 and I've had this great career and I'm still in this great career and I now want to have a family, like you better figure out how to find some balance before this baby comes and like start taking care of yourself now to help with the pregnancy and the rest of your life.
Yeah. It's actually really cool. I have a patient right now who she's like 60 years old. She retired like 2 years ago, and she's brought up the book Outlive by Peter Attia multiple times. And her mother is 80 and has some health decline, and she's been taking care of her mother. And she's like, I read this book by Peter Attia, Outlive. And she's like, it made me realize like how important it is for me to take care of myself. And she's like, even though it's like late, so I'm doing everything I can to reverse this. So like my kids don't have to take care of me.
Yes, that's a huge one.
And it was a really interesting outlook on it. I was like, okay. But interesting question here to put you on the hot seat of how much more risk would you say, even if you were younger, say you were 25, do you think there's more risk of being 25 and obese or overweight versus you at 46 that's been lived a healthy lifestyle their whole life?
I love this question because this is exactly what went through my head every time I go into the doctor's office and they treated me like I was fragile. And I don't like to do like the judgment thing here of comparison, but I do think, I mean, yeah, I think I'm in a better situation than someone who's 24 and obese trying to, now the kind of messed up thing about that is that person probably, they might have fertility issues. I mean, obesity is associated with that. But in your 20s, you still have like a shit ton of eggs and like, they're probably decent quality. I don't know. Age seems to still be the biggest factor in terms of egg quality. I don't know if we have enough data on like obesity, and because again, we can't really measure egg quality, but if you're in your 20s, you're probably not going to have a hard time getting pregnant, even if you're obese.
Well, not even getting pregnant, but having like a healthy
pregnancy. Yeah, no, then they're on an uphill battle there because hypertension. Because again, even if you're overweight or obese in your 20s, you may not have any lab values that are out of the normal range, but you add a pregnancy to that. And again, this is like a stress test for the body. You have a parasite. It might be a cute parasite, but still a parasite. And your body is going to be prioritizing that life form, right? So that means if you haven't already been taking care of yourself, I would suspect that those people are going to be at higher risk for things like preeclampsia, gestational diabetes for sure. And yeah, so I think I felt like I was in a much better position, even age wise.
And also too, like I go to the grocery store and I'm like, you see these overweight parents with an overweight like toddler or newborn. And it's like, hey, how are you going to take care of this person for the next 20 years if you at 20 something years old haven't managed your health independently to then do this to the kid? And it's just all learned behaviors. It's like, are we setting these kids up for failure or success long term? And how many health issues are they going to have, especially with like the food and the environment we live in now?
Yeah.
And you see the grocery cart full of just processed junk food.
I know. And again, I think this is where there is an advantage to waiting till later in life. And it's unfortunate that evolution hasn't caught up yet for women to be able to conceive as long as men can. Because like where did that like mishap occur? Because I do think that, having the knowledge of like, because I mean, Stacey Sims talks about this too. Like when you're in your 20s, you can pretty much get away with anything. You could like hit the gym a couple times a week just for like, beach muscle kind of activity or just to like show up and like go back to your diet of like pizza and rum and cokes and you're probably still going to be fine. But like we all know, like people always say, oh, like wait till you get older. And I was always like, that's not going to be me. And honestly, it hasn't been. Like people are like, oh, when you turn 40, you're not going to want to run anymore because your knees are going to, and I'm like, I feel great running. I felt great running all the way till like the 9th month of pregnancy. So, and it's different for everybody, but I think part of it is like, well, what did you do until you were 40 that makes your knees hurt and you're, what didn't you do? Or what didn't you do? Exactly. So, those of us who have kind of like course corrected a little bit after our, fun 20s and maybe early 30s, but I think that there's an advantage there, even just knowledge wise, like you said, because I see this too, and I'm always like heartbroken. Now, I also always want to admit, like, where was I? I was in Punxsutawney, Pennsylvania last week for work. Yeah, it's where Phil lives.
Yeah, Phil.
I met him. He was so cute.
Did you?
Yeah, he was adorable. But I went into a grocery store to get, specifically, I needed lunch. And so I wanted to get like some Greek yogurt because I was like, so hard to get protein when you're on the road, right? This grocery store was like what they call a food desert. It was just full of crap. None of the fruit was organic. And like, I'm not super, like, oh, everybody should be eating organic because it's not possible. It's not always accessible. It's definitely more expensive. But like, even just to have some like options there for like the ones that, like apples, which technically have, higher pesticide rates and things like that. So there was nothing like that. And every aisle was just processed foods. They had entire cooler cases of all the different colors of drinks, like green and red and orange and like the iced teas of all the, and I was like, this was so eye-opening to me because we live in a pretty like affluent area. We have access to places like Whole Foods and, this was an area where this town doesn't have anything other than that groundhog, right? Like, and this, you can see why they have elevated it to this level where they actually get some attention. But I was like, what's the health like in this area? And so when we talk about people and like kind of shaming them for what's in their shopping carts, some of that is lack of education. Some of it is lack of access. And I think from when we're in an area where you actually have options that are healthier, I think it's education. I think it's on us to try to kind of figure out how to put that down. And I don't know if they're getting that education when they're going through their prenatal visits, but that's something that should be happening during that time period. Right?
Yeah. Well, it's typically probably not like.
Of course not. Nobody said a word to me about it. About nutrition.
No, most doctors don't even have training on it.
No.
Don't get me started on.
I know. Total tangent. Yeah, I know. But when you have somebody kind of like captive in a pregnancy journey and you're going in for regular visits, how hard would it be to take 5 minutes to be like, hey, here's another thing you should be thinking about? I don't really understand that gap there versus looking at someone like me who already has their shit together with diet and exercise and nutrition. My blood pressure is amazing. My HDLs are like through the roof. Like I have unbelievable genetics and also a good lifestyle. And they're bugging me about, well, you got to go in for extra testing twice a week. And I'm like, why? Do you see anything that's like a problem here? Well, no, but you're over 40, and it's like, okay, but you're going to let somebody come in who's like obese and, if they have hypertension, they're going to do something about it. They're probably going to put them on meds, or like maybe they'll induce them early too to prevent preeclampsia or whatnot. But like, they're not giving them any guidance on, hey, here are some things that you should think about, especially early pregnancy where, not much is happening. You can still like probably start a walking program or something.
Yeah. I went to a gastroenterologist, which is all about your gut and your small intestine, your digestion. And a lot of that has to do with the food you're eating. Mm-hmm. I asked him if I should do a low FODMAP diet, and he didn't know what that was.
Yikes.
Yeah. I was like, all right, we're done here.
Yeah.
Like, I'm going to go find someone else to talk to if you don't know what this is. And he didn't know like all the peptides on like BPC 157, which is gastric juice, which heals the small intestine. It's been pretty well studied at this point. Had no idea what that was either. I was like, okay.
Yeah.
Finding a new doctor. Like,
yeah.
If the guy that works on your digestion doesn't know about a very popular diet that works in digestion, like, yeah, what other things are we missing, or are people not getting in medical care?
And I think to bring it back to like the age versus younger age and lifestyle, I think it's a great question because they just follow protocol, right? They have their guidelines, they have their protocols, and it makes things easy. That's why they have protocols. But like, how about you just look at me for a second and have a conversation with me? Because there were a couple times where they were like, oh, your blood pressure is high today. Now, do you know how they measure blood pressure in the prenatal offices? And this is exactly what happened to my friend that I was talking about recently too. So like, you walk up to the second floor, you go in, you check in. They're like, oh, we're ready for you. You're in like your winter coat and boots, and you're like walking down the hallway, and they're like, oh, jump on the scale for me. Okay. They take your weight with like all that shit on. Then you go into the office, and you don't even have your jacket off before they've got the cuff on over your sweatshirt.
Oh,
and
good.
Then they're like, oh, you're at like 130. And I'm like a 110 systolic. So like maybe
I just exercised up the stairs.
Take that again. Mm-hmm. And there was one day where I had my OBGYN appointment and my annual primary care the same day, and they happened to be right down the hall from each other. The blood pressure they had for me in my OBGYN office was like 130, and they were like, oh, this is high. I'm like, this is bullshit. And so then I go down to my PCP, and it was like 110. And I was like, they don't even do blood pressure appropriately. And when I went to the hospital for those twice a week non-stress tests that they made me do because of my age, my blood pressure was always beautiful. Baby was always doing fine. And I talked to them about it, and they're like, do you know how many people they send over to us because of quote unquote hypertension, just because they're not doing blood pressure correctly? And I'm like, I believe it. Yeah. So like, there's also like this burden on the healthcare system. They're sending them to the hospital because they're like, oh, this person has hypertension. It's like, no, you just didn't let them sit for 5 minutes. And if you knew how to take proper blood pressure out, not on top of a sweatshirt, and not after somebody's just been like walking up the stairs and you haven't even given them time to like settle, like a resting blood pressure is actually supposed to be after a rest. And so it's just little stuff like that, but they just kind of, I think, tie in this idea that like, oh, well, she's over 40, so she's probably going to have high blood pressure anyway. So yeah, you're at 130, you're probably at risk. And it's like, let's dissociate some of these this preconceived notions that you have and look at me as an individual and ask me a few questions about myself, or say, hey, maybe we should take this again. Mm-hmm. Such crap.
Yeah. How many pull-ups can you still do?
Man, my pull-ups have suffered. So early pregnancy, I could still do 10 strict. Now I'm struggling because I had to back off of them. And this was like my whole life. I've been able to like just jump on a bar and be able to do at least like 7.
I think I witnessed training. You do like 12 while I was in college and you were teaching there.
Yeah. I think my all-time high was like 13. And I think it was like, I think I have a video of it. It was like the day I turned 40, I did it just to like prove myself. But yeah, during pregnancy, I had to switch to like, I did a lot of ring rows. So I was, modifying everything. So I'm working my way back on my pull-ups. I did some good ones in the hotel last week when I was out for work.
It's just looking at our overall level of fitness and blood pressure too of like, can we take this and be like, yeah, maybe this blood pressure isn't so bad. It's just an exercise response instead of it's high.
Yeah, exactly.
Any other misconceptions or anything you wanted to go through?
I mean, those were probably the biggest ones. I mean, I think there's misconceptions on both sides. Like, one is a misconception that because even if you're over 40, you're super healthy, conception and pregnancy will be easy. It's so individual. So I don't want to like paint that picture wrong, but I just think like the message is like, take care of yourself as best as you possibly can, for even if you don't want to have kids. Like that should be for everybody, right? Like we should just be like, we want to live long and live independent, right? As long as we possibly can. But if you're going to have kids, like, yeah, it's going to be, I mean, right now you have a program for me that's 3 days a week. I probably do one day sometimes. And
you're competing this weekend. Great.
Yeah. This is just my baseline. I'm just doing it to make myself get back in the game. But, it's really hard to do everything once the kid is here, because you're going to have to just adapt and like fit in what you can when you can. And so the better baseline you have for that, the better off you are. So it's just, I think that's any age. Sometimes I do wonder, like, am I, like when I see some of these like younger moms, I'm like, they definitely look like they have more energy than I do.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's an age thing or my lifestyle of like working full time and taking care of this kid and trying to get workouts in. And
I don't know. I don't know how some of my friends do it too, because I'm tired at 33 without kids. Yeah. Sometimes I'm like, I don't know how I would add a child into this and manage everything that I do on top of that.
Yeah. A lot of it is what can you take off your plate too.
Yeah.
And I do think that the older age benefits again are just perspective. And like, even for me, having been like very career minded for a long time, as soon as I had the kiddo, I was like, boundaries, like, sorry, childcare ends at 4:30. So that means I'm not on calls after 4:30, you know? And, back in the day, I'd be like, okay, well, like, let me put her down somewhere and I can jump on this call. I'm like, nope, sorry, it's done. So I think there's just something about like knowing who you are, knowing how you want to live, like what are your priorities, what are your values, and being able to just stick to those a little bit better and not be as much of a people pleaser or just feel like you have to continue to try to push or to climb the ladder or whatever. It's just kind of like, no, I know who I am now. Been there, done that with a lot of stuff and made the mistakes, learned from them. Yeah. Moving on.
And so we're doing a competition this weekend.
Yeah.
So how old is Scarlett now?
She's like 14 and a half months.
Okay. What made you want to do this competition?
I'm very goal oriented. So I just felt like I was kind of like messing around with working out and, just trying like a little bit of this, a little bit of that. And I love Olympic lifting. And I was sad when I had to stop snatching when I was pregnant. And I just really wanted to get back to it. And I felt like doing a competition would make it real to me versus just like messing around a little bit. So investing in it, like hiring a coach, being part of a community, seeing Megan there pregnant and lifting was like, you have a lot of cool female athletes that are older as well. And I love that you're focused on a lot of the masters athletes now too, and especially for women. So I'm nowhere near where I want to be, but that's helpful to me. So I just want to get a baseline, jump in and feel like myself again too. Like this is just for me. Like there's not a lot of things like that for me right now. So, and having that date set and being like, I'm going to show up and I'm going to put this friggin' singlet on. It just, I knew it would motivate me because once we do this one, I'm going to be like, okay, now let's get to work because now I know where I want to go and what I want my numbers to look like. I think it's hilarious that there's no masters group in this one. So it's all open. So I'm based on the public entries. I'm by far the oldest. But like at first I was like, oh boy, but then I was like, you know what? That's great. Like I want to be that person. If there are people in the audience who are like, oh shit, that woman's 48 years old and she's doing this. Like I want people to see like, yeah, you can still do this. And I mean, I haven't done a lifting competition since 2019. But I want to be that person. Like I said to, you have this awesome teen athlete. And I said to her, like, Brooke, I wish that...
We talk about Brooke on the podcast all the time.
Yeah, Brooke's fucking awesome. But I said to her one day, I was like, I wish I had started lifting when I was your age. And I hope you're still lifting when you're my age. And I think that that's like my goal, my vision for like women in general, like just strength training in general and the empowerment of it. So yeah, it's going to be fun. It's going to be, it is what it is, but it pushes me out of my comfort zone.
Yeah, do that and push me out of mine too, because it's like this is the least prepared I've ever had an athlete going into a meet. So, and then I should call Dan and be like, hey, we should have an ambulance here just in case Meg
goes into labor.
I'm not a real doctor. So.
She'll be fine. I have no worries about her.
I'm not worried either. So, and then, so to wrap things up here too, you also, you have a new product you're launching, right? And you want to discuss that at all?
So one of the things that was also cool about, I don't know, maybe it was helpful to be older in this regard too, because there's like this dual identity for me. And sometimes I feel like for myself, I felt like if I had had kids earlier, that would have been like my identity. Like, so having kind of built my identity for 40 years before even like considering it, I have an attachment to that. And so when I had Scarlett, there was still always this part of me that was like, okay, I need to keep doing things for myself. And so one of the things I did was like, I kept writing this blog that I had started when I was pregnant, and I wanted to get one out every week. And I did it even when I was going through all that time of like waking up in the middle of the night, and like, it was a beast, but I was like, I have a goal. And when I do this, I feel like I have an identity that's outside of being a mom. The other thing that happened because of that breastfeeding journey was like, there's got to be a better way for people to do this. And especially when I started going back to work and I was traveling and pumping, and there's like all this extra shit that you don't even realize you have to take with you, and all of these other barriers to like, where do I do this? When do I do this? How do I like excuse myself from a meeting? So now I have this big passion for working moms or anyone who's like having to breast pump outside of the home. And so I can't say too much yet because we're still,
prototyping.
We're still in prototype, and we're getting very close to manufacturing. But I'm working on a solution for women so that the amount of stuff they have to carry with them is reduced and is optimized for efficiency, just to make one thing a little bit easier. And pumping breast milk is it's one of the number one reasons that people stop breastfeeding. And when I say breastfeeding, I mean either nursing or providing breast milk that's been pumped, is because they go back to work and they just can't manage it because pumping's such a fucking pain in the ass. So we're just trying to help them make that process a little bit easier and more efficient, so that if they want to continue, even when they're going back into their daily lives, that maybe that allows them to continue for as long as they want to. So that's all I'll say about it. But it's more of a convenience. It's a convenience kind of efficiency product.
All I can think of is was it Meet the Fockers or Meet the Parents when Robert De Niro has the fake boob he made himself. That's all I can think of.
Yeah, it's not that.
Yeah, okay. That's what I think of every time I hear you talk about this mysterious product.
No, and I have this awesome engineer that's working with me who's like just totally into it. He's like so good at what he does, and he's like learning everything, and he's just like, him and his wife are just amazing, and I'm like, I never thought I'd have like a dude as a partner on a project like this, but I was like, it's kind of awesome because he's just like, well, why can't we make this better for women too? And I'm like, oh, we totally could. Let's do that too. So we've got like a great pipeline of ideas too.
That's cool.
Yeah.
And then what's the blog really about too?
So Warrior by Day, which is a play on my last name. And it's a mindset blog really. And I took some time off. I made it a year, but I'm like really, really wanting to get back to it because every day I have like thoughts and ideas. And a lot of it is, again, around my premise that I think people can always change their mind and change their belief systems and their mindsets, and their actions as a result of that too. And, I just, like I said, I've lived a long life and I've had a lot of like missteps and challenges and learned a lot from them, and tried to always take that with me as with humility, and also around other people who are maybe kind of beating themselves up over things that they've done or thought about, and I'm just like, you know what, we're all human. We're in this together. Like, let's talk about these things and give each other permission to fail and to fuck up, and then to just like own it and then try again. So it's a lot of mindset stuff. How do we communicate with each other? Another big premise is just like, be a little bit more curious about the world around you. Ask questions, right? Like, you're a great question asker. I mean, that's why you have a podcast too. But rather than making assumptions,
because I'm annoying and I want to know why.
Yeah, well, that's true too. I do know that. I do remember that, and you were annoying, but as a student. But also, this is why you're so smart, because I think one of the biggest things we're missing right now is human connection, and I think a lot of that starts with just being open to asking other people, like, well, why do you think about that? Or why do you think about it that way? Or like, so tell me more about that. Like, because that wasn't my perception. Like, you and I will have conversations about some controversial topics and be like, well, this is what this person says about it. But like, is there any truth to that? And then we'll go like digging, like, can we find another perspective on this? So the blog talks a lot about that too.
Yeah. Yeah. It's really cool. Cause I remember in school too, like you were always very open-minded or, you know, spoke a lot about being open-minded and looking things in different ways. And like, I don't know, you always just had like very inspirational speeches in class. It was like, yeah, that's why you were my favorite.
Oh, thanks.
So yeah, I definitely, is there a place people can find the blog?
Yep. dday.blog.
Oh, okay. And if people want to reach out to you too, where can they find you?
So my professional email is 5080health.com @gmail.com. So it's 5080health@gmail.com. And yeah, I'm open. Like if you have fertility questions, advanced maternal age, exercise questions. Technically I have an exercise physiology background, but I've never really used it.
What is your PhD in?
Just integrative physiology, but I studied postmenopausal weight gain and reproductive endocrinology. So, and now I'm working in pharma. Yeah. On the medical side, but yeah, no, love to, I'm always happy to help.
Cool. Well, it was pretty cool to have my former professor and athlete come into my house and do this podcast in person and talk about all these things and help people maybe find something out that they need help with. So thanks for coming on.
Well, I appreciate you being interested in these kinds of topics too.
Always. Just super annoying questions from me all the time.
Keep it up.
Will do.
84% of you that listen to this podcast frequently do not hit the follow button. If you've enjoyed any of these episodes, could you do us a favor and hit the follow button, leave a rating, and maybe leave us a review? It helps this channel more than you know, and the bigger the channel gets, the bigger the guests get. If you'd like to know more about training in person or online with Brett's Gym, Architect Fitness, please follow us on social at ARKITECT Fitness on Instagram or visit ARKITECTfitness.com. Or if you want to rehab with barbell therapy online or in person, check out @barbell.therapy or visit barbelltherapyandperformance.com. Thank you for taking the time to listen.